There was the George Jetson condominium, Glendale, Arizona, University of Phoenix Stadium. It is kind of cool out there. We've been there several times. They have the grass field that takes about an hour and a half. They put it on trolleys and roll it in, so you're playing on natural grass, yet indoors. But really don't care about it any more than that because the Panthers are not there and in the Super Bowl.
Takes the fun out of it. It's got a retractable roof, but they wasted all that money. They never retracted for games. They always want that crowd noise, in their opinion, to stay in. So that was wasted money.
Not to the stadium, no.
Yeah.
I know there's an In-N-Out burger right near it. I like that, so that's good.
Big foodie. See, he's still
It's all about the food with us.
It's Johnny Fantasy, John Halpin. He's also a draft Nick and fantasy football guru, and he's still smarting, Zoke, from last week's drubbing that we administered to him in our Pick'ems contest that we have every week. And he brought his daughter in, he brought the food in, and that's one of my favorite shows we've ever done.
You held Abby out of school, which I felt bad about. What kind of note do you send to the teacher? Dear teacher, Abby can't come to school today. We have to pay off a bet on television.
Had to give Mick and Jim chicken.
That and it was a CMS school day. But
we're going to do it one more time, right? This will be our last one of these of the year, or of the season anyway. And how do you have it structured this time so that we can win again?
We're going to do the same thing. We're going to do a quarterback, a running back, and two wide receivers / tight ends. There's not a lot to choose from. Makes it more interesting. You know, there's not going to be, doesn't sound like there's going to be a lot of explosion in this game, big numbers, but you know, this is it, our last chance to make fun of each other and all that stuff.
And our wager this week is giant oversized pizza that will take up the entire desktop here. So who's the real winner in this? The crew, as always, because they don't have to buy and they'll get fed. So they love this show.
It's a good deal.
Aren't Fridays fun?
Mesomorphic enough as it is, all except Brittany, of course. All right, Zoke, what do you think? So any offensive player of either the Patriots or the Seahawks?
I'm going to steal a page out of John Halpin's fantasy playbook and go Rob Gronkowski.
I like it.
Don't you think, for us? All right, New England Patriots tight end. I mean, he's solid. I think if you can find a weakness in the Seattle defense, and there's not many, that might be one area where they're a little bit soft because they're so good deep that maybe Gronkowski, some of the intermediate stuff might be where there's some offense there.
All right. Gronk's hard to argue with. He's the best receiver in the pool here.
You can't have him.
I got to go Lynch. You know what? Even though he's not talking to a lot of people this week, that's okay. We're not worried about that. Marshawn Lynch, I think for the Seahawks to win, I really think the Patriots are going to try to keep Russell Wilson in the pocket. They're going to try as hard as they can. Not necessarily going to work, but they're going to try. I think the Seahawks are going to give Lynch the ball somewhere between 25 and 30 times. So just on volume alone, Patriots don't give up a lot of big plays, but even if he gets 3.5 yards a carry, he probably goes over 100 or close to it.
All right.
Good call. So we need to block him. So I say let's either go with Paul Lind, Wally Cox, or Charlie Weaver.
Ruth Buzzy's in the corner, but all right. It's actually your pick. I went Gronkowski, so...
what if we did another receiver? Because the natural tendency would be to pick a back or a QB.
Yeah, he already took a running back. So.
Right. So, but what if we went with what we think might be the second best receiver?
So we could have the top two receivers in this draft to ourselves. We've been listening to Halpin all year. All right, we'll pick one. Which one?
Edelman.
Oh, we've had him before. He's good.
Julian Edelman.
Like it. I was hoping I'm figuring the way the Seahawks are going to play. Look, LaFell's on the outside. One of the corners gets him. Gronk, they focus as many resources on him as possible. I think that opens it up for Edelman to catch, 6, 7, 8 passes. I know he does that most of the time, but I think he's the one. You sort of had to go Gronk as the best receiver, but Edelman's the one who could be a sneaky play and have a really nice day. So
this is the most congenial draft ever because he's complimenting all of our picks as we make them.
It's made me nervous.
This trash talking is just off the hook.
That's it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You don't really mean it.
All right. Second up now, since the receivers I wanted are gone, let's go Tom Brady.
Cheater.
Well,
Boo, cheater.
I have him every week, don't I? Something like. Seems like
What's the PSI of the football? So we need to know that before we need to know.
We're taking Dougie Spoon.
At what point of the day are we measuring the PSI of the football?
Right before kickoff.
I like Brady here. I think he's gonna throw play. I think the Patriots will try to run on them. He'll get his. They'll probably dink and dunk when they throw. But if I have to pick one of the quarterbacks here, it's not like I have another quarterback somewhere else that's going to throw for 400 yards, most likely. I prefer Brady to Wilson.
We're going to throw in assistant equipment guy Dougie Spoons from the Saturday Night Live sketch as part. You get him with Brady. It's kind of a package deal.
That's fine. I'll take him.
All right. So Mick, we don't have a. There's really no reason for us to pick our quarterback right away because he's already taken one of the two quarterbacks. So we'll default at the end on our fourth pick to quarterback. So let's pick a running back. And it's not like a star-studded group once you get past Marshawn Lynch. I'm thinking LeGarrette Blount. What do you think?
Basher, the big physical runner. When he was with Tampa Bay, made news with jumping over people with 2 weeks of rest for this game. I think it's a good pick.
All right, LeGarrette Blount.
LeGarrette Blount. All right.
Final answer.
So now I got to go 2 receivers. My first one's going to be Doug Baldwin. I am afraid that Revis is going to follow him around all day, but considering what's left on the table, since this is a 2-team fantasy draft, there's not a lot to work with of the rest of the guys. I guess Baldwin's my guy.
We'll give you Golden Tate and Percy Harvin if you want.
Really?
As additional players. Oh, that's right. They're not on their team anymore. So we got one last pick to make, and it's a default. We got to pick a quarterback. Yeah. So unless we pick Jimmy Garoppolo, Tom Brady, who's on the table still, Garoppolo's still out there, is Russell Wilson. And we won with him on his worst day in the history of his career, from Pop Warner till the NFC Championship game. He had never played worse than the time we picked him, and somehow we still got enough points, and we won with Russell Wilson to get chicken.
If it's the kind of game that this last Super Bowl 48 was, what Seattle put up, 43 points maybe?
Yes.
That was in the first quarter against Denver.
Yeah, it could be a good pick. I like our teams, Oak, and I think that I'm feeling for Johnny Fantasy. Should we give him an extra pick, a free extra?
Well, he's supposed to make his 4th pick, but let's see who picks 4th, and then we'll decide how we feel about it.
An extra pick now, huh? That's where we are. All right.
I gave you Dougie Spoons.
I gave me Dougie Spoons.
A
I
little
appreciate
haughty
that.
after one victory, so
Yeah.
I guess Brandon LaFell.
That sounded really.
My other option is what, Danny Amendola? Luke Wilson. I did think about Luke Wilson, the tight end for the Seahawks, because I think he could play well. And I think fantasy owners next year, a little bit of a sleeper, keep an eye on him. But if I had taken him, I would have had Lynch, Baldwin, and Wilson. That would have put all my eggs in the Seahawks basket. And then, since I don't think either team is going to score a ton, I figured I'd balance it out a little bit. So I took LaFell. One big play is all he needs to be productive.
We're pretty top-heavy Patriots for playing the #1 defense in football in Seattle. So we'll see how that works out for us. Well, you've won 2 of the bets. We won 1, so you're actually ahead 2-1. But here's our lineups.
Mick and the Zoke, Russell Wilson, LeGarrette Blount, Edelman, and Gronk. Not necessarily in that order.
Like it, though.
Johnny Fantasy.
Ugh.
Brady, Lynch, Baldwin, and then his flex pick was, quote, I guess Brandon LaFell.
No offense, Brandon.
Right.
I didn't mean it like that.
It's like backyard football. I guess we'll take Timmy's little brother.
Take him. Come
so
on.
pizza is the bet?
Pizza's the bet.
All right, I like thin crust.
Me too.
Plenty of cheese.
All right, we're all in on that.
And
Crew,
a
you're
lot
going to
of-
get thin crust by default.
right.
It'll fill the table next week.
A lot of napkins, too.
Pineapple
Bring your
Canadian
own
bacon
drinks,
for
too.
you.
We're not supplying drinks if we lose.
I may wear a clip-on tie next week because there'll be a lot of tomato sauce flying. Okay, stand by. When we come back, speaking of food, we'll have our Super Bowl All-Star must-have to snack on list next. From Charlotte, this is Inside Panther Football. So that you two can speak as if you're in television. That what you just saw is what we might call a beauty shot, or you might call it wallpaper, or you might even call it, if you're old school, B-roll.
Looks like a football in the desert to me.
In fact, this entire show this year could be referred to as B-roll.
Wow.
In some cases, but for the most part, I'm just kidding. Don't be so
Talk about
sensitive.
being in the desert.
For the most part, it's A-roll, straight ahead A-roll. Now, this is Johnny Fantasy, John Halpin, our fantasy football expert. And when you're packing the intellectual horsepower that this man is, we must tap into his historical knowledge and perspective of the Super Bowl as it relates to fantasy performances. And who are some of the all-stars in that regard, John?
Yeah, you look at Super Bowl history, and there's lots of them. More recently, as offense has sort of, come to the fore in football, probably in the first 20 Super Bowls, there weren't a lot of great fantasy performances. Quarterback, Steve Young. Everyone remember when the 49ers killed the Chargers that one year? Steve Young, 325 yards passing, 49 yards rushing. We always talk about Cam Newton being a good fantasy quarterback when he runs, and 6 touchdown passes. There have been a lot of really good quarterback performances. I think that's certainly taken the cake.
Yeah, they were worried when Joe Montana was leaving. That worked out okay, having Steve Young. All right, running back. One of these I remember, but one is really you got to jog the memory on the other running back.
Yeah, Terrell Davis is the first one. Terrell Davis, 157 and 3 touchdowns the year that the Broncos beat the Packers. The thing you got to remember about that, if this hypothetically was a fantasy game, Terrell Davis, they let him score. inside of the last 2 minutes.
Right.
It was 24-24. The Broncos were inside the Packers' 5-yard line with less than 2 minutes to go. And basically they said, well, if we don't let them score, they're going to run the clock down to 3 seconds to kick a field goal. So they basically parted the Red Sea and let Terrell Davis run into the end zone. That was an easy one.
Was a coach,
right. The second one, everybody remembers Doug Williams from Super Bowl 22. Timmy Smith ran for 204 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. Yardage-wise, I think it's the greatest performance in Super Bowl history.
He was never heard from ever again. He really didn't do anything outside of that. It was an amazing day, but he really didn't have a career. That was it.
And that's actually like, even though this was a much bigger game, David Tyree never caught another pass in the NFL after he caught that ball in the Super Bowl.
Really, the one he pinned on his helmet was the last one. All right.
It's crazy. A lot of wide receiver performances in the Super Bowl, of course. We see the NFL films footage of the great Steelers, John Stallworth and Lynn Swann, of course, making their circus catches. But who's had the best receiving Super Bowls in history?
Well, our team here has 2 wide receivers, and they're both Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice in Super Bowl 29 with Steve Young that year that we were talking about earlier. 10 catches, 149 yards, 3 touchdowns. The second one for Jerry Rice in Super Bowl 24 when they beat the Broncos. Joe Montana was quarterbacking. Montana threw 5 touchdowns that game. I think he had 297 yards. Rice, 7 catches for $148 and 3 touchdowns. He has been very arguably the greatest wide receiver in Super Bowl history.
Hard to argue that, if not of regulation football too, not just Super Bowl football. We have to have a tight end on the team. We always pick a tight end, but again, not many people would guess who the best performance at that position was.
No, I was a little surprised. I was researching this the other day. Dan Ross on the Bengals. You remember that first 49ers Super Bowl? It was Super Bowl 16 when, 16?
Where Tim Kromrye broke his leg.
There you go.
Remember that one?
That's the one. The 49ers won their first Super Bowl against the Bengals. I think it wound up 26-21. Dan Ross from the Bengals, 11 catches, 104 yards, and 2 touchdowns. There's not a lot of huge statistical performances you remember from that day. Everybody remembers Joe Montana because that's when he sort of stepped forward and became a big-time quarterback in a lot of people's eyes. Dan Ross put up really big numbers that day. Otherwise, Super Bowl tight ends, not too many big numbers. I think John Mackey was the second one on the list from that early Super Bowl where he made that one big play for the Packers.
When an event gets covered so tenaciously like the Super Bowl, there's only so much analysis you can do of the game itself and the characters in it. So we filter down to where do you like to watch the game, how do you watch it, and then what do you eat during the game. So what is the Johnny Fantasy? How do you handicap the most favorite food groups in terms of the best for Super Bowl Sunday?
The best one, even though it's not easy to make at home, make well, I'm going with nachos. I got to go with the nachos. If I'm going to stick something in my oven, pull them out quick. You got to eat them fast because they'll, the cheese gets cold really quick and then they're not as good. But my first pick in a fantasy Super Bowl food draft is definitely nachos.
What you guys have?
Buffalo chicken dip. We started doing this when we tailgate when our kids were playing high school football. And that's another thing you want to eat warm, obviously. So, but it's some shredded chicken, some cream cheese, some Texas Pete in there. To get that buffalo kind of flavor, but can't go wrong with that.
You're going Texas Pete, no, Frank's, none of that. So you're going Texas Pete.
Yeah, but it's a whole buffalo chicken dip thing. So yeah, we don't need pigs in a blanket or anything
Just
like
checking.
that. Make Brussels sprouts?
No, yeah, thanks. Tofu, fried tofu. No, I'm a big popcorn guy. I like my view is unless you have to turn the volume up to hear the TV or the radio over your own jaw muscles working, your snacks are not crispy and salty enough. So enjoy the game. We're all going over to Zoke's house or maybe to Johnny Fantasies. We'll let you know. And when we come back, thanks for your good segments, Johnny Fantasy. When we return, B. Brian Strickland of Panthers.com. It's next on Inside Panther Football.
Not good for Halpin.
Aerobic pom-pomming by John Halpin, our fantasy football
He gets so bored
expert.
at the table.
And then stage left over here, B. Brian Strickland of Panthers.com, wearing the brown, Natalie attired Jim Zoke. And my name is Mick. B. What will the .com boys, you and Max and the rest of you be doing now as the NFL calendar really never stops in the modern day era, does it?
Well,
they're shaking your pom-poms. And we leave you with a highlight package on Inside Panther Football.
Just ugly.